All right. All right. Well, I'll just do the intro right now. All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Liam McCullum Show. I'm very happy to have Mr. Deming on again, along with his brother, John Deming. So, two Mr. Demings here. But yeah, I'm really excited for this. I haven't done a podcast with more than one person in a while. So, I'm excited to see where it goes. I expect this to be a little less formal and kind of allow us to just riff off of each other. But why don't you introduce yourself, John, and tell people a little bit about yourself, and then both of you can kind of maybe tell your story about how you guys got into libertarianism and about the Liberty Brothers.
Sure. Okay. So, like I said, I'm John Deming. I was born in Helena and raised there. And now I'm teaching in Colstrip, Montana, teaching high school chemistry and physics. I'm starting my 25th year of teaching, which doesn't seem like that long, but I enjoy every moment of it. And so I guess that's kind of a brief history of me.
Well, congrats. That's awesome. Two teachers. It's incredible. And Mr. Deming, you were just telling me that you were kind of right now this week, you kind of started to regret retiring just because of how much news is going on. I mean, it's been a crazy week and I really do want to get into that. But why don't you tell a little bit about the Liberty Brothers and when you started it and kind of your guys's, I guess, how you became a libertarian and how that kind of coincided with Ron Paul and everything like that.
Sure. So actually, it was John who he asked me if I had ever heard of anybody by the name of Ron Paul. And of course I had heard of him, but I didn't know very much about him. And so I think it was John that brought me into thinking about libertarianism through getting introduced kind of to Ron Paul's ideas. So as so many people have, libertarianism began with Ron Paul. But like I said, John was the guy that did that for me. And then the more I looked into it, the more sense it made. Even though the very first time I heard about Ron Paul, what I had heard from a mainstream media course, he sounded like a crazy person. Well, he's been proven right again and again, and continues to be proven right about everything he's ever said. So libertarianism, I think, is a common sense idea, and Ron Paul really brought that out. So I should let John talk about the Liberty Brothers because it was actually his platform, and he invited me to jump on there so that we could be collaborators on writing articles for a newspaper back in Wisconsin, of all places, and that was the genesis of the Liberty Brothers. I kind of wish we kept doing that, to be honest. But anyway, John, go ahead and tell Liam about the Liberty Brothers.
Well, I think, Liam, you were asking how we get into libertarianism. And I guess for me, it started after September 11th. And, you know, September 11th happened, and I was actually in graduate school at the University of Montana, getting ready to teach classes when it happened. And so, you know, we don't need to rehash the whole September 11th scenario. Just suffice to say that teaching a bunch of college kids, freshmen in college, they come into class that afternoon and they're like, "What are we at war? What's going on?" And that time was pretty stressful. And working through that, you know, then I see that we go into Afghanistan, even though the guys on the planes were from Saudi Arabia. And then we're going to liberate Iraq, and we see purple thumbs for democracy. And it just seemed like the drums of war were the drumbeat was getting louder and louder, but it didn't seem like it was addressing the things that I saw happen on September 11th. And you know, the prices were going up, things were happening that I didn't really understand in economics. And so I started studying economics, just to try to figure out what I was seeing. And the more I studied it, the more I started seeing what was coming in the media didn't make any sense, you know. And what what we were being told. And, you know, you see the Patriot Act, you see all these things happening, and it just didn't add up in my head. And so, you know, I started looking at the data, and that's where I ended up finding, you know, this libertarian idea, and then finding Ron Paul. And his Revolution book, I read, and then I had a bunch of college students when I was teaching at Winona State asking me about their first election, who to vote for. Are they going to vote for Obama? You know, most of the kids that were asking me were liberals, and so I just told them, here, read this book and see what you think. And they were grabbing hold of it and running with it. And it was unbelievable how just handing those kids a book and letting them see what it meant was really enlightening to me, and exciting, because I had fought through the economics, I'd fought through all these things, and now they really grabbed on and went with it. And so that's where, once I saw the need for that, that's where I got into the Liberty Brothers. And we had, prior to starting that website, some people were asking me to give some lectures in Wisconsin about economics, some public lectures. And I gave like one of them. And then I was asking Lee, look, I'm going to need some help with these, because some of these guys were asking for, okay, economics. And then the Patriot Act, I think, was another month that they asked for, and some other issues that were going on at the time between 2008 and 2010. And so we kind of got together to say, all right, there seems to be a need. So I was building these videos, and that was kind of the genesis. It was really organic. Started it with some kids at the college level, some people asked me to speak publicly, and then it kind of morphed into that, what you saw with that site that we ran for a few years.
Yeah, and Mr. Deming, you told me just while you were campaigning, someone approached you and said that you're Lee Deming from the Liberty Brothers.
That's right.
How does that feel?
That was really a shock.
Yeah.
Relatively high profile person within the politics in Montana. And she just wanted to visit. We're standing in the lobby over in Bozeman. And she says, you're one of the Liberty Brothers. And I said, well, so at least one person read those.
Yeah.
But she said that they're very powerful. And I was gratified that she would say that she would remember that. John, when was the last one we published? When was the last time we got in that Wisconsin paper?
Probably 2011.
Yeah, that's been a while.
Because the editor of the Eau Claire Journal was requesting us to write stuff, and he published, you know, big articles in that journal for us.
Those are pretty good, actually. John just sent me copies of those, and I've read them again, and I think we were right on, even though it was quite a while ago.
Are there any archives of them, or is the blog still up?
We can get them to you.
Okay.
I can get you copies if you want to post them or whatever.
Yeah, I'd love to read them and maybe post a few under the video. Do you know anything about the analytics? I mean, it is interesting that someone in Montana and Bozeman just happened to have been a reader. So do you know if it got quite a big reach?
I don't. And I think some of that's, you know, my fault for not paying close attention, right? If you look at it back then, you say, man, that could have turned into something. But to be honest with you, I think that was my, in my head at least, that was my educational philosophical journey. You know, one of the things we were doing was looking at the daily headlines and publishing like here's a link to an article from the New York Times, and here's a 1-paragraph blurb about what it could have been and what's the problem with it. And I would think, at least for me, that was how I was building in my head, you know, this kind of a philosophy that would drive future choices that I make. And so we were putting it out there, but I think it was just as much for me to build my own philosophy as it was to push it to the masses. And so I didn't really ever look at any of if it was having an effect. I hope it did. I think for me, it was as much internal as external.
Yeah. And it is interesting because, like, especially during the Ron Paul campaign, 2008, 2012, I feel like you really start to see the ground up movement that became the Ron Paul revolution, and how present they were on the internet. I mean, in these blogs, like the fact that Ron Paul had one fundraiser and was able to meet his record and pass it just in one night. And then like how people were able to pull a fund together to buy a blimp that said Ron Paul. Like,
Yeah.
like it was really a decentralized ground up movement.
Yeah.
Well, and to be honest with you, I think that's the exciting thing for me about today. I mean, there's a lot of craziness and there's a lot of things that people get down on, but I watched that firsthand with 18 to 22-year-old kids, and what you said about it being organic was unbelievable. And people aren't different, right? 18 to 25-year-old kids aren't different than they were in 2008, 2010. And they just needed to see it, they just needed to see it and hear it. And they bought in. And so I think it's exciting right now.
Sure is. That's why I regret sort of retiring.
Yeah. Well,
like I said before, Liam, can you imagine walking in a classroom this August?
I mean, it's prime right now. I think that all the questions would be super fascinating. I mean, I think it was a good time in 2018 too, but right now I think all of these philosophical questions are really starting to bubble up. They're actually we're starting to see that like philosophical divide in the country a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we talked before, Unit 1 of that book pretty much lays it out. You talked about Unit 4 and the presidency, the executive branch, and all that kind of stuff. All of that would be obviously interesting, but the philosophy behind why you set your governments up the way you do, that you have, and we'll probably talk about this, but you have the executive branch completely out of control, in my opinion. And you have the state governments kind of pushing back, but not pushing back nearly as hard as they need to. And so those kids can see what's happening because we're not taking care of business.
Yeah. Yeah. I did want to make one more comment about the kind of movement before we get into that, because I totally agree. And I think we want to get into the IRS and the FBI and how the executive is too powerful. But just being a part of the liberty movement right now, I just finished up in Orlando with Young Americans for Liberty, which was Students for Ron Paul. And then I was at the Mises Institute the week before at Mises University. And I got to meet a lot of these people that I've considered heroes for a long time. But also, I think the most important part about it was seeing people from all sides, like people who were left-leaning and people who were right-leaning, who came together on the idea of libertarianism and started to follow Ron Paul. And I think, John, you had mentioned something like that last time we talked, how that was one of the most exciting things about it is how, especially with Occupy Wall Street, there was a movement that I think Ron Paul kind of was able to attract that brought people from kind of the populist left. And now, where are they? They're kind of lost.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think, if we don't run candidates that can make the point and do they have to be inspired? I don't know. People are pretty smart. It doesn't have to be the best speaker. They just have to carry the right message. And I think if people are just given a chance to listen, then they can make up their own mind. They're smart enough. And I think that's the exciting thing is people from the left, people from the right, they hear the message and the truth, and then they can grab on. And once people grab on, liberty is a pretty exciting thing. Every generation's got to fight for it. But once you have it and you realize you have it, you're going to cling on to it. And that brings a lot of interesting groups of people together.
Yeah, definitely. But we should get into the news because, I mean, things are going crazy, and I'm sure things are breaking right now as we're talking. But I think the biggest thing that we should probably talk about is this thing going on with Trump. I don't even really know where to start with it. But what is your guys' assessment of what's going on right now? For people who don't know, I'm sure everyone knows. Trump's house was raided the other day by the FBI. And there are a lot of takes, even within the liberty sphere. Judge Napolitano seems to think that he's actually, he must be guilty of something because there was a subpoena. But others, I think like Dave Smith, are saying, well, how can I even trust what the FBI is saying? Something else he said is the whole quote, if they can do this to a president, they can do this to any one of us line of thinking. He's saying that that's completely backwards because they've been doing it to people for years. So now they think that they can do it to a president. So I'm interested to see what you think about that. Do you think that they might have something on Trump? We're almost speaking too prematurely, but knowing how they've handled Trump and Trump derangement syndrome over the last 5 years, I tend to think something weird is going on.
Yeah, I'll start.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's something weird going on. So anybody that trusts the FBI, they've had their head in the sand for a long time. The FBI was instrumental in attempting to take down Martin Luther King Jr. You guys probably know that historically. So that guy probably wasn't a saint either, but my goodness, Martin Luther King Jr. So from that point forward, can you trust a single thing they say or do? And I think the answer is absolutely not. They are a national police force under the direction of a political leader, a president, who then selects the head of the department. And so is there any question that they've been used for political purposes? The answer is no, there's no question. And this is no different. What they've done to Trump, and I don't care if he has nuclear codes in his safe. I don't care. The very fact, and of course we're going to have to look, make sure that this didn't actually happen. The FBI probably should have said, "Look, get your lawyer. We're going to come down, and we got a warrant. We're going to take a look at the safe. Here are the things we're looking for." The fact that they sealed the warrant and they refused to allow Trump's lawyers to be present. And I hear, and I don't know if this is true, that they searched Melania's clothes. Now that's a special kind of sick, but it's a special kind of intimidation as well. And so I absolutely think this dirty from the word go. I think the FBI director and the head of the Department of Justice are criminals. And I don't care what he's got in his safe. That is not the way to do it. And particularly now, it's like in your face. All right, we're going to do this to the president. I know you like him, but we're going to do it, and we don't care. We don't care what it looks like. That's essentially what Merrick Garland said. So, in fact, I probably shouldn't talk about it anymore because I'm getting kind of ticked off again. So,
yeah. Well, what are you thinking, John?
Well, I think, like Lee said, I don't really care what's in there. I mean, if there's something illegal and something happens eventually, there's a right way and a wrong way to go about stuff. And I think the brazenness of the FBI now is really kind of important to consider. It's going to have a chilling effect on normal dissent, but also, maybe more vocal dissent for sure. Because you start looking at it and you start thinking, wait a minute, if they're going to do this, to the former president, who am I? What could they do to me? And to be honest with you, I think what I was most worried about is if I was Trump, I'd be worried that they're going to plant something. You know, I would be very worried if I don't get to have somebody on the ground there that I trust that can watch the process. Then they could literally say anything they want.
Yeah.
And if you're running the FBI, I would think you want every I dotted and T crossed, and have no one be able to say there was anything nefarious. And yet that's not what happened. It's the opposite of that. And so it just feels dirty, and I don't know what's going to happen, but they went about it the wrong way. And you know, you don't have to look very far to see where the FBI is even recently is totally on the wrong side of things. You know, the New York Times is in a lawsuit with what Project Veritas or whatever, actively defamation lawsuit, and Project Veritas is going to get raided by the FBI. And 3 minutes after the raid starts, New York Times calls their attorney and says, "Hey, you're getting raided by the FBI. You're getting raided by the FBI right now." Well, how did they know, right? And so that had to be leaked from the FBI to an organization that is in a current lawsuit with Project Veritas. It doesn't. The whole thing seems questionable, and so their actions, man, even if there are illegalities, you know, questionable actions, the way they're going about it is totally wrong-headed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was saying something along the lines of like, even if he did commit a crime, even if there are documents in the safe, we can acknowledge that and say that maybe he's even guilty. I'm not a Trump fan at all, on foreign policy, on many different issues, guns, name it. But we can also acknowledge that the FBI and everything else going on, the investigation is political, and that the FBI has always been a political weapon. So I think that that's the worst part about this is I think some libertarians would say, well, okay, maybe certain politicians should be locked up, but like, we know that these bodies aren't going to apply these things equally. It's not like the Clintons are going to be in jail. It's not like the Bushes are going to be in jail. It's not like the Epsteins are going to be in jail and the people on the list. So I think that's the worst part about this is it's not, we're not even saying that he's you know, not guilty. It's that we can recognize that the FBI is what it is. And I found this video of Ron Paul in the 1988 Libertarian race when he ran in the Libertarian Party. And I don't know who was interviewing him, but they asked him if he supports the FBI. And I think the full question involved the FBI, CIA, and IRS. So the whole clip's even better. But he addresses the FBI. It's like they've been a political weapon since Woodrow Wilson when he was imprisoning people who opposed the war.
Right.
And I mean, Vietnam, both Republicans and Democrats used it. And I mean, he's spot on about it. And the libertarians have been spot on since the 80s.
You know, most of our history, we didn't have those institutions. The FBI came in during the First World War. And interestingly enough, one thing that Woodrow Wilson did, he used the FBI to spy on American citizens and actually arrest them if they disagreed with his foreign policy about going to war in Europe. And isn't it interesting how recent they used it in the Vietnam era? Democrats used it there. Republicans used the FBI to spy on 100 different groups in this country, including the churches, who disagree with the policy in Central America. It almost looks like the FBI was designed to spy on Americans who might be disagreeing with policy, especially the foreign policy. So the FBI, although I don't think I can condemn everything they've ever done, because I'm sure some of the investigations and investigation of crime has been beneficial, but that could be accomplished through Justice Department within our states. We wouldn't reject that portion of it. But I think the FBI has kept and continues to keep a lot of records on a lot of individuals.
And I think it is a little ironic now that we have Republicans who have been supporting and funding the FBI for years are now saying we need to defund it. So that's an interesting narrative that's coming out. And I hope we can kind of latch onto that and encourage them in that direction.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah, you go back to how I believe it was the FBI, maybe just the entire Department of Justice, but they were going to stick the FBI on parents at school board meetings as being domestic terrorists. Now, I didn't make that up. It sounds like it's made up. It should be made up. It should be a wild, loony conspiracy theory, but it's not. It happened in America. Parents at school board meetings are domestic terrorists. So that's to me, that's the extent of the credibility of the FBI. No, and how about, don't get me started, sorry. How about the also calling into question the patriotism or the ability to become domestic terrorists of those who fly the wrong flag, like the Betsy Ross flag, or the one that I have out here that I fly occasionally is the Gadsden flag. Yeah, so that makes me a domestic terrorist? Well, apparently, according to my government, thinks that.
Yeah. Well, I heard from Michael Heiss while I was down in Florida. He's the organizer of the Mises Caucus, and apparently in 2008 there was something similar where the FBI released some papers saying that Ron Paul supporters are people they should watch out for. And anarcho-capitalists made it on the list this time. I think I saw them on there. But yeah, I think it's, I mean, if you look at the Governor Whitmer thing too, wasn't every single person involved in that supposed assassination attempt, like every single one was an FBI agent undercover, except one, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
one or two. I can't remember. Yeah. It doesn't seem like there's very many actual perpetrators, and mostly it was FBI agents.
Yeah.
Yeah. They got no credibility.
I think that's like going back to that, whatever it was, 2008, when they're, I think the danger of an organization like the FBI is that it's a moving target on who is the terrorist, who's chosen by the government to be rewarded, and who's going to be targeted and punished, right? And so that's a moving target, maybe, depending on who's in charge. And so I think everybody should be worried. But when you look back at that 2008, the fusion centers that came up out of the Patriot Act and subsequent laws being passed, the fusion center, I believe it was in Missouri, was where that information came out, where supporters of Ron Paul were going to be considered right-wing extremists and potential terrorists. Well, that was a huge group of people, right? And once that came out in Missouri, then people start, that like I said, a chilling effect. What does that do? And how does that change people's behavior? They didn't have to be prosecuted for anything, but maybe they pull back their funding for their political candidate. Maybe they don't go to as many meetings, and so those actions, even when you're not being rated, can dramatically alter people.
So I can't wait to. Sorry. I'm sorry, John.
Go ahead.
I cut you off. I just couldn't resist. So one of the groups on that list of potential domestic terrorists, right-wing extremists, was the Knights of Columbus. Well, that's a men's fraternal organization, service organization among Catholics. And somebody in the paper actually responded to that by saying, "You mean the pancake breakfast guys? Those are the domestic terrorists?" So there again, just an example. I got zero credibility as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and that there's any question that this isn't political. I mean, just the fact that Merrick Garland's the one out there saying that he signed off on this. Did you guys watch the video that he gave yesterday? The little talk that he gave? Okay. Yeah. What do you make of that? If you want to rehash what he said, Mr. Deming, Lee Deming, yeah. If you just want to update people as to what Merrick claimed, it was very short, and what your takeaways were from that.
Yeah, so he said, essentially he said, yeah, I ordered it. It didn't come from, the local office. I actually authorized the search. And then there was, I can't remember if it was him or Ray, but they were talking about how anyone who questioned, the loyalty and patriotism and professionalism of the FBI, horrible people. Well, I do every day. So I guess I'm a horrible person, but you got to clean up your act if you're going to have any credibility. And I've told you 3 or 4 times now, you got 0. So essentially, to me, my takeaway was that was in your face. He said, we had the right to do it. We did it. And that's the way it goes. What are you going to do about it? Okay. Well, go ahead.
Do you foresee that they're actually going to let us know what the documents are? Or are we just going to have to depend on them saying, yeah, these are very secret documents that, I mean, the whole crime is based on the fact that we can't even know what they are. And that's part of the reason why it's a crime for him to take them. But I mean, can we even trust what they say then if they're not, I mean, we can't know what they are.
No, you can't trust it. I just got an alert on my phone while we were talking that they unsealed the search warrant. I haven't seen that yet. So we'd have to see what they had in the search warrant, what they're looking for in Melania's clothes.
We could do this live. I could pull it up.
That would be fun to get the first reactions. So I can't wait to see what that is and what their excuse was. But yeah, we can't trust anything. I just don't, particularly since, as John said, they could have planted anything they wanted in there, because I don't think that there was a Trump representative there at all during the search. So yeah, I don't trust it. I don't care if I don't care what they find.
Yeah.
If he stole the Declaration of Independence and hid it in there, I wouldn't believe it for a second. Now, is it possible for President Trump to have committed some wrongdoing? Yeah, I never said. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan either. However, I think we have to be very careful if we're going after a politician of this renown. I mean, he's really popular, and I don't think this raid hurt his popularity at all. It's almost like the FBI wanted him to get a big boost in the ratings, because that happened.
Yeah, even Andrew Cuomo said the same thing. He came out and said they better have a reason behind this, or else you won the election for Trump. And I do think that's the fact that I am with the Libertarian Party and I'm going to back the Libertarian Party into 2024. Like, I will do that, I think, regardless of what happens. But the fact that they're putting me in a position to now have to defend Trump, who I do not support, they're very successful. They're very skilled and successful at getting people who don't like Trump to defend Trump. I mean, think about all of the leftist journalists, like Matt Taibbi. I think he's been defending Trump, or Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah.
Like Glenn, years ago was pretty close to a socialist, and now people consider him right wing. And it's because they are so terrible on Russia, Russiagate, Trump. It does feel like they want him to be elected. They love him that much.
I better not respond.
Yeah, well, I have the warrant. So, John, if you have anything else that you're thinking, you can go now while I read the warrant, and then I can try to sum it up or read the parts that are important.
Yeah, I think what I find interesting, I guess, about their approach is that they do drive people who may not be Trump supporters into the arena of defending him, like you said. But I think it's fascinating because, not too many years ago, the Republican Party was really, really trying to enhance the FBI and use it, in the Patriot Act. We got FISA courts. We've got all this craziness going on, and increase their power domestically. And okay, well, be careful what you wish for, and now you're seeing a brazen FBI go after the figurehead of the Republican Party for sure right now. And I think there's going to be quite a few Republicans are going to start saying, hey, we need to tap the brakes on this, which you know, libertarians were saying before the Patriot Act was signed. But you know, the Republican Party was going for it, and I hope that this pushes them in the direction of, okay, we need to really rethink this political arm of the Department of Justice and say, man, we need to rein this thing in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I have the warrant. So what it says is so the property to be seized is all physical documents and records constituting evidence, contraband, fruits of crime, or other items illegally possessed in violation of 18 U.S. Code 793. So that is gathering, transmitting, or losing documents. Oh, losing defense information. And then 18 U.S. Code 2071, which is concealment, removal, or mutilation generally. And then U.S. Code 1519, which is destruction, alteration, or falsification of records in federal investigations and bankruptcy. They're saying this includes any physical documents with classification markings, along with any containers, boxes, including any other contents in which such documents are located, as well as any other containers, boxes that are collectively stored or found together with the aforementioned documents and containers, boxes. Information, including communications in any form regarding the retrieval, storage, or transmission of national defense information or classified material. And then any government and or presidential records created between January 20th, 2017 and January 20th, 2021, or any evidence of the knowing alteration, destruction, or concealment of any government and or presidential records, or of any documents with classification markings. And then there's a receipt of property, and it says that they have, I don't know if this is the amount of documents, but it says 4 documents, 29 box labeled A14, and then box labeled A26, box labeled A43, and then there's 2 more. And then there's a long list of other things. Description of items include executive grant of clemency with Roger Stone. So that's one of the documents. Info regarding President of France, leather-bound box of documents, various classified TSC or SCI documents, potential presidential record, binders of photos, handwritten note, and then a bunch of boxes and miscellaneous secret documents. And that looks to be all.
Yeah, I don't know half of what that means, what all that stuff is. My understanding was that when they left the White House, the Trumps had the General Service Administration box up a bunch of the documents that they had and sent that to the Trumps. I don't know if that's true, or I can't even remember where I heard that, but if that's true, then the FBI is getting after President Trump for stuff that the government sent him to Mar-a-Lago. Is that?
It sounds right. Well, and the most interesting angle about this, I think, is, you know, a lot of people are comparing this to Trump's accusation against Hillary, but the main distinction here is that Hillary had it on a digital server, and she was the Secretary of State, and it had been alerted to officials that the Russians had already potentially accessed these documents because they were on the server. Big difference with Trump is that he was the president and he can declassify any document that he wants. So I don't know if he has to technically declassify something, like if he actually has to go through the official process, or if this is enough for him to effectively have declassified. The other interesting thing that I'm seeing is apparently the Department of Justice is investigating whether Donald Trump violated the Espionage Act. Which, would that be an accusation of treason? I mean, which I know the death penalty is the punishment too.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, this is huge stuff.
That is a punishment.
Yeah. but like it is ballsy. I don't know any other word, but it is very ballsy to be doing this. Yeah, I don't know. People are saying this is it's like Banana Republic type stuff. We invade countries and we do regime changes in countries that imprison their political opponents.
Yeah.
And we are now flirting with it. The big thing I think is how so if you don't view this as political, like Merrick Garland, part of the reason that he's not on the Supreme Court is because of Donald Trump's presidency. Merrick Garland was appointed by President Biden, who will be an opponent to Trump in 2024. Likely, maybe. We don't know if Biden will make it. But either way, this is political. It absolutely is. But Merrick Garland was appointed by Trump's opponent. So I don't know how he doesn't recuse himself. I don't know. This all just seems way too political, and it seems like theater too, but I don't know what they think they're going to get out of it, because to me it looks like people are out defending him. Other people are saying that maybe if he gets indicted and convicted, he won't be able to run for president, but more conservative types are saying, well, the Constitution and the qualifications for president overrule any legislation. So I don't know what the angle is here. And that's why I am interested in the angle. If we just put aside the argument that the FBI is a political weapon, if we put aside that argument and grant that and say, well, maybe on a technical matter, Trump actually did do something here. And if that is the case, Judge Napolitano is making the argument, and they were friends, that Trump might actually be indicted, and his political career might be done, because someone signed off on the subpoena, and there had to have been 2 judges that agreed to that. And apparently they were cooperating. Trump was cooperating with FBI, but I have no idea.
You guys might know more than me, because this is totally a question I don't have an answer to, but which judges were the judges that would sign off on that? Are those FISA judges that we never hear about, or are those judges in an actual courtroom that we get to see the light of day?
Yeah, those are the only judge I know of that I didn't realize it had to be 2. That's the first I've heard of it. The only judge I know of somehow tied up in the Jeffrey Epstein thing.
Yeah, I'm going to pull that up right now.
Okay.
Napolitano said that it has to be 2 judges to sign off, and I think it's specifically on the subpoena that they have to sign off on. But and this attorney that is linked to Epstein, he's linked to that specific case that got Epstein off for. I mean, he only had to serve for a few months.
Well, he had to serve for the rest of his life.
Yeah. But because I think they had originally tried convicting Epstein years ago, and this specific attorney got him off.
Oh,
and that's
okay.
Yeah, because there were 2 cases. One that happened years ago when he should have been locked up, and the most recent where he was found dead. Yeah, let me
clarify something while we got a minute. We talked about Napolitano. I'm actually terribly disappointed in the judge. I think he kind of expected or wanted to be named to the Supreme Court by Trump, and I think it ticked him off. So he's actually hasn't been the best friend of President Trump ever since, and I think this might be some of that leaking into his commentary. I don't know, but it just seems, this to me seems so blatant. I'm not on the level legally, obviously, as any of those judges, including Judge Knapp, but I gotta say that this thing stinks to high heaven, and I can't believe that Judge Napolitano would give credence to judges within a system that has been known to be corrupt for a long time, for decades and decades.
Yeah.
But you guys know about exigent letters? Do you know about those? You ever heard of those?
A little bit. We talked about them a while back.
Yeah. So FBI agents and other federal officials are given the opportunity to write exigent letters, which means that they can write their own search warrants and then go search stuff. So there's no judge involved. That's an exigent letter. Well, how do we trust that? That's why I was surprised it took 2 judges. Under exigent circumstances, you don't need any judge. So that system is completely corrupt, and it was corrupted in a way to facilitate searches with regard to terrorists. Well, yeah, how long did that last before that turned completely corrupt?
Yeah. So I think it was 2 judges that signed off on the subpoena that Trump was actually cooperating with. So they subpoenaed certain documents, and this had been like a month-long process. And apparently they were actually cooperating. And then there was only one judge that had to sign off on this search warrant. His name is Bruce Reinhart, who once quit his job as a U.S. attorney to work for Jeffrey Epstein, the multimillionaire accused sex trafficker who was being targeted in a probe by the U.S. Attorney's Office, as reported in the Miami Herald on November 28th, 2018. Yeah, so he's the guy.
That's the guy.
And I think he also defended a lot of the people, a lot of the others accused with Epstein. But I'm trying to find more information on him because I think it's the specific case that got Epstein off.
I do think that this is just an attempt to discredit Trump. There's a columnist, a reporter, journalist, what's her name, who has come out a couple times and said that Biden administration is dedicated to arresting Trump. Now, did you hear what was it the president of Honduras said the other day? He said, if that happened in my country, if we were arresting or searching political opponents, what would you say about that? Emerald Robinson. Have you ever read Emerald Robinson?
I haven't, no. She's
worth reading.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to take her name down. Yeah, I can't find anything about the judge. But I mean, all of this, I think that we all agree this is political. And on the Napolitano thing, I don't know if he agrees with the subpoena or the warrant. I think he's just saying, like, he's looking at it and he's saying, if a subpoena happened and there was a violation of the subpoena and a search warrant, it's more like what I took from him, and there might be more to it, that he was descriptively saying that whether he supports it or not, it looks like they might actually try to put something on Trump, and he might be indicted. But yeah, I've heard similar things, and I've heard multiple stories about Napolitano accepting or refusing the nomination, and I've also heard stories that he was upset that he didn't get picked. So I don't know where he's at with it, but well, I think we've kind of exhausted that a little bit. I'm excited to see where that goes. The other thing that I think is pressing news, I mean, this would have been the top story of the week until the FBI raid, was that the IRS, through this legislation, is going to have 87,000 new IRS agents and officials. So yeah, what do you guys make of that, and what are your thoughts?
Well,
you want to start?
I think my thoughts are, big businesses, big corporations, and people with a lot of money are going to have the money, the resources to hire the right tax accountants, stuff like that, and they're probably going to be okay. But 87,000 more agents, who are the people that are going to run into problems, self owner, a business owner that's doing their own taxes, individuals, that are going to make mistakes on their forms using TurboTax or something. And that those 87,000 more agents are going to be able to get to find them. Whereas, I also think it stifles competition, right? So if you're a startup in your garage and you're messing with TurboTax, trying to do your stuff on your own because you're on a shoestring budget, it's harder for you to get into the economy and compete with somebody that's been there. They have the money and the resources to deal with their own accountants. And so it has strange fingers in the economy that I think most people don't talk about.
Do you know how they're labeling this? Like what did they say was the reasoning behind it? Is it that they're did they say that they're going after the rich? I mean, I know it's probably like all the talking points about the rich aren't paying enough or something like that. Did they label it as this, or was it kind of hidden in this legislation? Do any of you know about that?
I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think the big takeaway is like, even right now, the IRS does target lower income people more. Most of the audits target people who aren't in the 1%. And I think I'm curious to see what states might be able to do about this to see if they can nullify it. We've talked about nullification in the past, and back to the FBI thing. I know that there was a representative out of Florida who's talking about not allowing the state to cooperate with the FBI, and I know that Montana has done something along those lines with the ATF, with anti-commandeering. And that's based in U.S. Precedent, Supreme Court precedent with Prince v. U.S., which upheld a Montana sheriff nullifying the Brady Bill. So we passed that legislation last session that nullified the ATF and any future federal gun control. But I wonder if there's a way for us to do something similar with the FBI and say that maybe no local official or any state official can assist in the enforcement of any investigation, or hopefully it could even happen with the IRS too. The state can nullify the IRS in some capacity.
Yeah, so I would prefer that the state officials don't cooperate with any federal officials, but that's not going to happen. For one thing, just think of like the U.S. Forest Service. Are we going to have our sheriff, law enforcement people, fish and wildlife, or fish and game, fish, wildlife, and parks guys not collaborate or cooperate? I frankly, personally, would rather they didn't, but I don't think that's realistic. And I'm not sure how much involvement the state government does in IRS activities. But I would certainly think that it would be worthwhile, particularly in this environment, to pass a law similar to the gun law prohibition that was passed in the last session.
Yeah, I have this graphic here. I'm going to try to pull it up really quick, see if I can share my screen. Can you see that?
I can.
Yeah, so the percent of population living in poverty in 2018. So, I mean, you can see here the percent living in poverty and then where the IRS audits the most.
Well, how about that?
Yeah. And I'll share a link to that for the listeners.
You end up with the people that don't have the resources are going to make the most mistakes. And I'm not saying intentionally. I'm simply saying that you're going to make more mistakes when you're doing it yourself at capacity. And with 87,000 more agents, they're going to have more time to find that.
Yeah, and how about they just pulled down the job description for the IRS agents, I think yesterday, which included things like they will be required to carry a gun and will need to use force if necessary. So these aren't, I mean, it goes to the whole thing about like how the Department of Education has a SWAT team. Like why are these agencies required to use deadly force? If all that is happening is this is a very kind of bureaucratic managerial agency that is supposed to just audit people and look at these very technical balance sheet things, what about this requires them to hold a gun?
That's a good question. I hope we don't find the answer to that.
Yeah. But yeah, do you guys have any more thoughts on any of that, or are there any other issues that came up over the last 2 weeks? There's a lot going on, and I can't keep it all in my head.
Well, I can't either. The 87,000 agents, it was actually kind of horrifying. The whole idea that we need 87,000 more agents. Number one, if they're going to, so if the excuse is that we're going to get more tax collection because we got all these agents, more agents out there to do the work, and that the IRS right now is overtaxed. I mean, overworked and everything.
Nice pun.
If that's the excuse, how much do those 87,000 agents cost? So are we getting a significant tax income that's going to offset the cost of the 87,000 agents? Not to mention the guns they're going to have and the 5 million rounds of ammunition. You can't convince me that that's a good trade-off. There's something else going on there. And that conspiracy theories tend to come true after a short period of time. I don't know what's going on. I really don't. But I'm frankly very, very concerned that they're going to be up to no good. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Well, when you consider that all of the spending that actually hired these IRS agents, all of the spending, and I forget what the bill was called. Was this a part of the Inflation Reduction Act, that Orwellian bill?
I can't remember.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know which bill it was, but all of this spending is inflation spending anyway. All of this is deficit spending anyway. So the fact that these IRS agents will likely be hired on through deficit spending, and I mean, the government doesn't take in enough tax revenue to actually afford anything that they continue to spend. The kind of perverse and ironic thing about this is that these IRS agents won't even be collecting the taxes that will go to pay their salaries. They're going around, they're going to be using force against business owners, and we're not even taking in enough taxes to pay for what they do and whatever else was in the bill. So, I mean, that's another element to this, is like, as we've seen over the last 4 years, like, why do they even tax us anymore if they're just going to continue to print money?
Right. Well, right. Because then they get two taxes that way, right? They get the tax that they're levying, and they get the inflation tax. So they take your money twice, but they only have to tell you they're taking it once. And so, that's nice on their side.
Yeah. And I think it's also, it might be like the modern monetary theory where they think that the reason the dollar has value in the first place is because it's how they collect taxes. I mean, if you need to pay taxes in the dollar, that's where the value comes from, according to these modern monetary theorists. So maybe it's some weird backwards explanation like that too.
Well, I'm nervous about it because let's just say that you distribute those guys equally, that's over 1,700 agents per state. In addition to all the agents they have, that's an extra 1,740 agents per state that they're going to put in, right? So that's a huge number in their workforce that are going to be looking for, did you account for this loss? Did you account for this profit? It can't be good.
Yeah,
No.
I have another graphic that I want to pull up really quick to just demonstrate how scary this is.
if it was not scary enough.
Right.
Right.
All right. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
saw
this
that.
is an 87,000 person stadium. That's how many agents were just hired, with the expectation that they will carry a gun and be required to use force if they need it. So,
Well, if you think about it, they couldn't. That's more than would be held in the Washington Grizzly Stadium 3 times.
yeah.
You fill it up, kick them out, bring the next group in, kick them out, fill it up, kick them out. Oh, you still have like 13,000 agents standing outside. That's a huge number of people to come in.
Yeah. Well, I'm very interested to see what comes of all of this, and I'm sure we'll have to talk about it again in the future. But is there anything else, any other topic that you guys are focusing on right now, or that you guys want to bring up? Because I think we touched on all that there really is about the FBI that we know right now. And then, I mean, I'm sure everything else going on with the inflation bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So we're going to spend how much money to reduce inflation?
Fight inflation with inflation.
And then some of that money is allocated for green energy policies. And of course, that doesn't contribute to inflation either. Yeah. Wow.
This is where.
Go ahead.
This is where the whole question to me, like, do they think that their social engineering works? Like, are they just this engineerial kind of, like, they are very technical people and they think all of this works, or are they evil? Like, are they malicious, and do they have malicious intent, or do they genuinely just think that they're doing the best? I mean, I go back and forth on this question, but when you see that every single one of their policies leads towards mass hunger and supply chain destruction, especially when it comes to the third world, like, it makes you wonder.
I tend to hope that people are altruistic. And I think in many cases that's true, but I like to look at it that way, even if they're not. But I think that's in some ways the worst motivation for someone, because then it doesn't matter what the data say. They already have convinced themselves that they've taken the so-called high road. And so then they don't need to look at data and see if their policy matches with the outcomes, because they've already decided that their policy is the high road. And that's a really dangerous path. And I deal with that teaching science. And going through COVID with the students was an unbelievable experience, because the kids are like, well, we got to wear masks. We got to sit 6 feet apart. We got to do these things. Does it work? Right. And we'd start showing them data, and the kids are like, wait a minute, the data don't match with the policies. And so I think when people convince themselves that they're doing something on someone else's behalf, whether or not it's true, if they convince themselves of that, that's a really dangerous person to deal with when their policies are wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what did AOC say? Oh my gosh, it's been about a year ago or so. She said it's more important to be it's more important to be right in the heart rather than factually correct. I can't remember exactly what she said. It was so ridiculous I couldn't keep my brain, but it was something like that. So I think some of them generally believe that they're doing the right thing, and I think that's a move that's been put out to discredit our history too. You know, the founders are not universally loved anymore. Our history has been tossed out. In fact, it's been discredited, and we don't even want to think about it. You know, this quote unquote, our country's based on racism. So this country that it's the most powerful country in the world didn't get that way by accident. You know, and if you want to look at it, you can say, well, it happened in spite of being quote unquote based on slavery. But if you have a vision for your country that's X, and that vision and the way to get to that requires you to forget all of history that got us to this point, to the ability to be this powerful and this wealthy, you know, so you never look back on how you got there. So you can completely discredit that to move toward your ultimate utopia, which, by the way, I don't think it's going to be very nice. So
Right.
Anyway.
Well, Lee, I think, and Liam, I think that there's a book by William Bradford, the governor of the Jamestown colony or whatever, and he was talking about it's his description of what was occurring in the colony at the time, and initially, you know, before our what we call Thanksgiving, you know, if you read the book, and it's hard to read because it's in the Old English style, but when you read what he was describing, that first year, they were socialist. They were completely socialist, and set up each according to his need, by each according to his, you know, force or will, and they almost died of starvation. And first Thanksgiving was a mess. You know, it was like kind of a last hurrah. So because we don't know who's going to live through the winter, they do it again the next year, socialist, and again a bunch of people die off. And finally, they make a decision. Look, this isn't working, and they gave each person like 20 acres, each family, and some seeds to plant, and said, look, okay, you're going to be responsible for your own efforts here on this 20 acres. And if you don't do enough, you're going to perish. And they flourished, and they were able to export corn to Europe that year. And that was where they had a Thanksgiving to remember, not one of nervousness of their livelihood. Well, you look back at, if you read what he said over their history of those 3 years, you see a dramatic change, right? And we don't learn about it at all. We get this fairy tale of Thanksgiving, but it's completely unrealistic. And I think that the real danger of not looking back at the history is then people's understanding is whatever's said currently, and whoever speaks the loudest gets the attention. And the only way to deal with that is to look back, like Lee, like you said, look back and see, you know, what was happening, what's the data. The cool part scientifically is you can look back and say, okay, I think this is true. If it's true, and we look at this experiment, then what do we predict the future will be, right? That's what we want to do. If it's true and we do this experiment, what do we predict will happen in the future? And then see if our predictions match what happened. And in a history class, we can do that. We say, oh, look at what happened in the 30s. What do we predict happened? Okay, did we see it? And we change policy that way. But we don't often do that anymore because everybody's in here and now. They don't look back 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 years, 500 years and see what's worked.
Yeah, is that a Plymouth Plantation? Is that the book?
Yeah.
Okay.
History of a plantation. It's very difficult to read because it's the flowery prose. But he specifically describes women not wanting to work, able-bodied men not working. They didn't want to help their neighbor. And then the third year, he talks about the women being willing to go in the fields and work for their family. The guys were all working hard, and then they started to thrive. And from that point forward, they had a new vision for how to be successful.
Yeah, I think it goes to that. I mean, what you said earlier, Lee, about how civics, I mean, would be really interesting right now. Like, I think it would be really hard, I think, to be brutally honest in a civics class like that, the competition right now. You just wonder what they would say in DC in a lot of those panel conversations. Like, I mean, if I'm saying, yeah, it's really exciting that conservatives are finally waking up to what libertarians have been saying about the FBI. And I said that, Montana should be trying to nullify the FBI as much as possible. I don't think that they would like that very much. You might get a few. I think you're muted.
They certainly wouldn't accept that very well.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, your scores would reflect that. But you'd be absolutely right. So the heck with the scores. Just tell them the truth. You asked a question earlier whether these people are evil, or did you say misguided?
Yeah, I just wonder, like, often if the leaders, the worst of our leaders, are they just the technocratic? Is it the technocratic mind expressing itself, or are these people? Do they have malicious intent? Because I think the Christian answer is that we're all fallen and it's sin. But is there an actual conscious awareness of the malicious intent on these actors, or are they just technocrats who think that if you put humans into some equation on paper, you'll get the conclusion that you want? I just wonder if they are social engineers and they believe it'll work, or if they want an evil end.
So my answer to that is, yeah, both. I don't think there's any question in my mind that Bill Gates knows. I mean, he's said, how many times has he said that the planet's overpopulated? We need population reduction. How many times has he said that? It's not like he's hiding it. So does he think he's doing the planet a favor? Well, so if he does, he's stupid. And I think there's some evil in there as well. I think there's a superiority complex, really, among those technocrats that you talk about, that we know the best way and the rest of you guys don't know anything. And so, what's best for you is if we get rid of a few billion. And that number has been actually said out loud, that they want to reduce the population by billions. That's not a conspiracy theory if they say it out loud. So if you have a superiority complex and you think you know better than everybody else about how the world should go, and then you implement that, I think that's also evil. So I think the answer is both. And I think AOC is not very smart. Is she evil? I think so. Is Bernie Sanders evil? Well, is Joe Biden evil? There's no question. He is absolutely evil. A guy like Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, yeah, evil. I don't think she thinks more than anybody else that her way is the right way, but I think she has evil intent. So those are just me kind of giving you a straight story of what I think. I can't prove any of that, obviously, although I think it's pretty obvious that Joe Biden is evil intent for a long time. Just self-aggrandizement, and profit motive. Who knows what Hillary Clinton's deal is? Does she want power? I think so. And that in itself is evil. So anyway, my answer is both.
Yeah. Well, I had a professor, I'm not going to say which class, but the class was not at all related to what I'm about to say. He said, but he took a break one day and he said, I have hope in your generation, because climate change is it's a serious thing, and our planet cannot sustain the current population. And he just said it like that, just quick, very quick thing. And I mean, I do think that a lot of these climate change policies might be motivated by population concerns. Whether it's all of them, I can't say that, but I think a few of them, especially when these policies will affect the third world disproportionately, you have to wonder. And I agree with you. I think it's regardless of whether they believe it. I mean, we can say that the policies are evil, and trying to achieve power at that scale, I think, is evil in itself. So I think I agree with that. Well, I think we've been talking for quite a while. Do you guys have anything else to say, or you think we hit it all?
Well, we hit some of it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely go for hours, but do you have anything else on your mind right now, or we should definitely do this again, make it a segment?
Yeah, for sure. We
I
should.
think at some point, not today, maybe some other time, but I think at some point it would be helpful to talk to people about what can we do next, right? So, okay, so we've got these things going on. We had this we went through this COVID thing, and people are starting to push back, and now we've got this IRS thing going on, and so, you know, what power do the people have, and what can we do moving forward? You know, how do we stop some of this craziness? I think that might be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I would love to do that. And I mean, that's what I'm most interested in. I think the reason I always want to come up with these examples of interposition, I mean, I'm inclined to want to find areas where the state or a county can reject federal policy. But yeah, let's definitely schedule something for the future. And I'm really happy you guys came on, and I'm going to try to edit this and get this up today. It's August 12th is the day that we recorded it. But yeah, I'd love to have you back on.
Look at jury nullification, because we don't need to state it to interpose if we have 12 people that are willing to stand up and say the law is it's unlawful, that person is not guilty, right? I mean, I think that's probably, besides violence, that's your last actual line, because the law, they can write whatever law they want, but if 12 people stand up and say that is unlawful, therefore they're not guilty.
I think an interesting policy would be legislation requiring all juries to be instructed on jury nullification in the state.
I think so too. I think that'd be genius.
Yeah, and have it be clearly, like, maybe have like a standard presentation that's given to them on it that clearly like demonstrates the principle behind it too, that it's not just some weird technical, yeah, you can just say no. Like if you actually said, well, if you disagree with the law, you can say he's not guilty.
Right. Yeah, here's Article 1, Section 8. Is it in here? Is it in Article 1, Section 8? Okay. Not lawful. Move on. Right?
Yeah.
There was can I jump in quick? There was a judge at Nationals one year from Utah, and I didn't understand the question when he asked my kids. I don't think that was your group. It might have been. But he said, should a judge be able to seat a juror who doesn't believe that the law is just? Now, he didn't ask it that way. He asked it in a way in which I had no idea what he's asking. I'm kind of feel sorry for the kids because they tried, but they didn't have any idea. So one of the other judges interpreted the question for him, and that they did pretty well, actually, students. But that's what he was asking. He was asking whether the juror could be disqualified if they believe in jury nullification.
Right.
Well, it's none of his business. You know, that's not the judge's business. They should never even ask that question. And that's up to the juror, period.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't even think you should have to disclose that.
No,
right?
You shouldn't. And then if you say, well, I don't have to disclose that, you get dismissed.
Right.
Because they suspect you believe in jury nullification.
I think that's the problem, right? And so, and a simple instruction where they see, here's here's the premise, and then make your decision. You're not just assigning guilt or innocence to the person, but also essentially to the law that's being litigated. Well, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I think we could definitely do something like that in Montana. And I know the Foundation for, actually, I don't know what the acronym is, but FIJA, it's something to do with jury rights in Montana. I think that would be a really good organization to reach out to. And they have a bunch of literature on jury nullification, like Lysander Spooner's trial jury.
Yeah.
And I took a class this last year on constitutional law, and the most interesting part about it was that these critical theorists were making the argument for jury nullification from a critical legal perspective. So their thing was, African American communities should be able to nullify because the system is against them. So if it's for race reasons, their community should be able to nullify law. And of course, they had to put in a little line about this is not to say that we advocate for any other form of jury nullification or ones that might be identified with right wingers. But yeah, and I mean, but it was interesting because they didn't elaborate what that would look like. Because later they're like, well, I don't want to speak for other communities, but if other communities want to do that, then they should. And I'm like, well, why not everyone? Why we should just argue for jury nullification on principle. If you disagree with the law, you should vote not guilty. So that was the most interesting part of that class. Most of it was, I mean, I took value from it. I don't want to say it was completely terrible, but we were learning Marxist legal theory is what my professor said. So
I didn't know there was such a thing.
yeah, critical legal theory is disguised. It's called critical race theory or critical legal theory, and it's Marxist legal theory. But yeah, I'm house sitting, so I have to let these dogs out. They've been barking for a little. I'm sure you heard it. But thank you so much for coming on. We're gonna have to do it again. I really do mean we should make it a segment. Do you have like a public profile or anything? Do you guys want to say where people can find you on social media if they want to ask questions?
I'm on Facebook for my campaign. I almost never post there, but I've got virtually no other presence. I'm on MeWe, but that's a platform that not very many people are really on yet. So,
What about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can give you my email if they want to email me.
Sounds good. Well, if you want to get in touch with either of them, just reach out to me, and then I can get you in touch with John or Lee. But thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.